Hi guys, welcome to Lit Term number 2. This week we're going to focus on the storytelling arc, which sometimes some people refer to as the plot diagram, myself included, but there's a difference between the storytelling arc and the plot diagram. The storytelling arc is more of a basic general outline that most writers tend to follow, whereas plot can kind of shift within the arc. So think of this as the big umbrella, and then some of the pieces might fit differently depending on what's happening in the story. So the idea of having a format for storytelling was first introduced by this guy, Aristotle, who's a philosopher, and he first introduced this idea in 335 BCE, which stands for Before Common Era. Basically, his idea was that each story has a beginning, middle, and end, which you hear a lot about when we're talking about essays. Later, in the 1800s, this dapper German dude named Gustav Freytag, he was a writer and playwright for many German plays in the 1800s. He developed an idea of the plot or storytelling arc formatting more of a pyramid, which is what we've been teaching ever since. So this pyramid consists of these basic parts: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement, which is a French word. In exposition, the setting, the characters, and the conflict are introduced. And to break those down a little bit, setting is the time and place and the mood, which we talked about last week of the story. Characters include your protagonist and your antagonist, or your anti-hero, which are things we'll be looking at in the future. And the conflict, what type is it? Is it man versus man, man versus self? We categorize those pretty much into internal or external conflict at this point. So after we have some stuff introduced here in the exposition, we're going to move on to this point right here, which we call the initial incident. This is the first part of the book where the conflict first comes to the forefront and we start to head from the exposition into the rising action. Now, rising action can be a nice straight line like this to the climax, or sometimes the rising action might go more like this, with each incident building up to a higher point in the book. The climax then is going to be the emotional high point of the book, where the problem that we've been facing throughout its entirety is solved or starts to be resolved in some way. The falling action would be as we tend to wrap up these things. And finally, we're going to end here with the denouement, which, like I said, is a French word, which means tying up loose ends. So this is the part of the story where maybe we've solved the problem, but the character needs to ride off into the sunset, or we need to leave it open for the next book that's coming up. So there's a lot of stuff here that happens in the denouement that maybe wouldn't have happened in the falling action. Sometimes your plot diagram looks like this, and other times it might, drop off more dramatically. Like, you may not have a lot of falling action per se, but more like it's done. Here's the little denouement here, okay? Sometimes you may have things going like this all the way up and then drop off. A lot of times you're going to have plot lines overlaying each other, so there might be a plot involving a rivalry between two characters, and also a plot where you might have a love story going on. So there's oftentimes different things, which is why they say this is a storytelling arc instead of a plot diagram, because there's different parts of a plot. So that's what we're going to be looking at this week. You're going to be working on some stories of your own in preparation for writing for college, because that's really what those writing prompts are about. So when someone asks you to write a personal essay or a narrative, that really means that they're looking for, as it says here, a spoken or written account of connected events or a story. And it's called a narrative because you're supposed to be the narrator of your own story here. So that's why this guy is going to become important, especially as we move throughout the semester and get ready for other types of writing. But while we're looking at college essays, this is what we want to focus on. Thanks, guys, and have a good week.